We have done it. We did not go a second straight pay-per-view where at the end of the night, after every post-fight interview, in-cage interview, there be a empty spot on the throne of the light heavyweight division. Jamahal Hill takes care of business. No chill Hill. He wins every single round of this fight. 50-44 on all three judges' scorecards en route to a unanimous decision victory. It was a very emotional moment in both ways, Dom. You saw the way Jamahal Hill, when the moment hit him right after the fight, he collapsed into his corner's arms. Very emotional. A kid from Chicago who, was always, from his story, told he was never going to amount to much. And a lifetime commitment, hard work, dedication has gotten him to the pinnacle of the sport, which is what he's been working towards. And it's a little bit of thrill and agony because in the other corner, you saw Glover Teixeira take a hellacious beating. Too tough for his own good. Fight felt like it should have been stopped at some point, in the second half of that fight. And he retires. The crowd kind of, there's nobody really there as he announces it. These are his people. This is where he wanted to go out. He goes out obviously losing in that fight. It's a little bit of a mixed bag. Just a lot of emotions I felt in this fight. Both positive emotions for your winner, and then these, by negative, I mean, almost sad and just, I felt like it was just a sad, it was just a weird, it was a very mixed bag. I kept going back and forth on how I felt throughout that final, 5 minutes after the fight, just, really trying to sink it all in. So, Dominic, now that we're, 12 hours removed here, maybe a little less from that main event, how is it kind of hitting you now? I know you obviously probably feel similar in both ways. Sad for Glover, but happy for Jamahal. So what's kind of your takeaways here? Because obviously it was a one-sided fight. We thought it would be a lot more competitive going in terms of each guy had an advantage over the other, a conceived advantage, perceived advantage. Now, your takeaways.
I think it's hard to come out of that main event not recognizing the whole 25 minutes of work that Jamahal Hill put together. His grappling defense and takedown defense and even ability to transition and get up when he did get taken down those 1 or 2 times, 3 times at most. I did not expect that one bit. The fact that he was able to do that on a 6-week notice against a seasoned veteran like Glover Teixeira is insanely impressive to me. And then when you add in what he did on the feet, he looked as crisp as ever. He was landing big-time shots, precise shots. He didn't get too overzealous. Don't get me wrong, he went for the finish a couple times when he felt it presented itself. But as Noah said, Glover's just so damn tough. You couldn't put him away. So he was able to conserve his energy for the most part and look good all 5 rounds. Dude, I mean, I am just stunned at how good Jamahal Hill looked in this fight. I was not expecting that whatsoever. And you're right, in terms of the ending, the thrill and the agony of this sport. Sometimes it shows so much more than at others. And last night was a perfect example. You get the happy tears, from Jamahal Hill reaching the pinnacle of that sport after fighting and fighting. The first Dana White Contender Series alum to get a title, by the way, which is that's a big deal. And then on the other side, Glover retiring, putting the gloves down in the middle of the cage. 43 years old, been there, done that, done so many great things in the octagon for Brazilian MMA. It was just a whirlwind. It really was the whole night, and to be finished off like that with those 2 guys in an absolute war that they put on. I mean, dude, let's look at it this way. Glover Teixeira goes out, by the way, in retirement now with 2 back-to-back, fight of the nights. Obviously, the one with Jiri was a fight of the year. This one, not as close, don't get me wrong. But the fact that he was still there that whole time and at least threatening, the guy is just amazing. I hope he's in the Hall of Fame one day. And again, just Jamal Hill, I'm so incredibly impressed, Noah.
Yeah, completely agree. I definitely was leaning Glover Teixeira going into this fight. Jamal Hill statistically was one of the worst active UFC fighters in terms of his takedown defense. And this just was leaps and bounds better than what we had seen previously. Mix that with the fact that we knew Jamal Hill would have a speed advantage, an athletic advantage, a striking, more power punch. He was obviously a faster hand speed everywhere was going to really help him, and that was a huge part of this fight. I think his speed in getting to the takedown defense was masterful. And you know what? I think a big credit needs to be given to for this performance from Jamal Hill is the fact that Jamal Hill and Anthony Smith worked together in the lead up. Jamal asked Anthony Smith, who was previously scheduled to fight Jamal Hill before Jamal got plucked from that main event to this one for the title. Anthony Smith, the backup for this fight, agreed to prepare Jamal Hill for that fight with Glover Teixeira. You know, when you bring Anthony Smith in, a guy who has great submission capabilities and good takedowns, you are going to be working on that over and over and over again. Anthony Smith, while yes, in the mid to late 30s, is very much still a very athletic, very fast guy. So I think Jamal Hill got a lot of good looks by bringing in someone with those kind of capabilities. And once he was in the cage, Glover Teixeira, a bit more slower, stronger version of like an Anthony Smith, he did not have much issue with the strength since he's a pretty strong guy himself. And the speed was he was just in another league when it came to speed in this fight. It's sad for Glover Teixeira, but like you said, what would have happened if Glover wins here and then he retires again? Like, is it better to get us a champion who can now move the division forward? I don't know. I wouldn't have been upset, obviously, if Glover had won. I'm just wondering now, like, I didn't want Glover to take that kind of beating, but I'm just saying, like, is him losing the worst thing to happen here? I don't know. I'll let the people decide that one, Dom. But for Jamal Hill, what I think is very intriguing about his future prospects and now this idea of trying to establish a title reign is Dominic. Almost any matchup you can put with him, I don't think he's going to be a heavy favorite. You look at matchups with the likes of Jan Blachowicz, Magomed Ankalaev, Alexander Rakic. Probably forgetting a couple guys. I mean, Anthony Smith, I guess you could throw in there. With all these guys, Jiri Prochazka, of course, who did have a little message for the new champ afterwards. Mm-hmm. All these guys would either be a favorite against Jamal Hill in a title fight, or the odds would be very close, Dom. Do you disagree with me on that?
No, I think that's pretty accurate. Like, I think he did enough here defensively against Glover to ensure that he's never a big underdog necessarily going into any of those matchups. But on the flip side, I don't think he goes in as a huge favorite over any of them either. I mean, let's look at the immediate future. Jiri Prochazka. I envision Jiri would probably be the favorite in that fight, or at minimum, like a pick'em. Magomed, I'd say, would be the favorite. But again, after last night, I don't think nothing too drastic. Jan Blachowicz, probably a pick'em. Maybe Jamal gets a favorite in that one. But again, look at those three matchups, which is like the three most reasonable for the future here over the next year at least. And there's not going to be a big odds sway on either side of the coin, which makes it that much more interesting going into the fight. Much like coming into this fight, we were very intrigued. The odds were relatively close. We saw pros and cons for both guys and how they could win. And I think that's going to kind of happen in these next few fights. Again, I'll say with his takedown defense here, maybe the pros and cons get a little bit narrower and that gets even more. I guess you could even argue that sways more to Jamal Hill's favor. But I don't know, man. Like him and Jiri specifically, which is probably what will come next at probably the end of the year. I'm imagining that's what they'll do, or close to the end of the year, assuming Yuri's better by then. That's fascinating, man. Yuri's not afraid to just stand and trade and get into a war. Jamal obviously wants to stand, but it's just a whole different beast striking against Yuri than it is striking against Glover. That's a interesting fight for Yuri to return to and for Jamal to make his first title defense, dude.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance though, Dom, that with the severity of Yuri's injury, I actually think the next matchup that will probably happen will be on Ankalaev. Now, I'm not sure if cooler heads will prevail after that, obviously, draw that Magomed had with Jan last month. And, Ankalaev was very upset in the aftermath. He kind of said he doesn't know if he could ever fight again for that organization, the UFC. I'm sure cooler heads will prevail, but it's about if the UFC want to give a guy like Ankalaev that title shot, who is a terrific fighter, maybe even the best fighter in the division, skill for skill, but has maybe not put on the most exciting fights, especially as of late. And when you gave him his first title opportunity, not only did he sort of underperform in a lot of ways, but it also wasn't a very good fight, and there wasn't a clear winner at the end of it. So it might be a tough proposition, but if Jamahal Hill wants to stay active, someone's going to get that shot, Dom. And I think Ankalaev may be the more likely candidate of the group because of Yuri's injury. And, the feeling was that draw, if you didn't agree with it, Ankalaev was kind of the winner instead of Jan. So that's potentially your next matchup. And Dominic, I think that's a very tough matchup for Jamahal Hill. And that just leads to more intrigue and interest for a guy like me. When you have a champion who doesn't feel invincible, he already feels not necessarily vulnerable, but he's not perfect. I still think the takedown defense, even though he was able to look great here, a guy like Ankalaev can match Jamahal Hill in some of those athletic aspects, He is just very well-rounded. He's not, Glover in his 40s, as great as he has been being the champion at that age and whatnot. It's a different skill set. And Ankalaev, I think, is the faster guy, not compared to Jamahal Hill, compared to Glover. He's a lot faster, more athletic. I don't know about stronger, but he matches Jamahal Hill in more of that youthful vigor right now. So I do think that there is a good chance that fight happens, man. That is a very close fight. Dare I say, Ankalaev might be as much as a minus 150 favorite for that fight. So for Jamahal Hill, as great as a moment as this was, he's got to be feeling the way we know his mind to be. He's got to be thinking, I got to get back in the gym on Monday because there is a storm coming with the likes of Jan. Like I said, all these guys, Ankalaev, Rakic, Prochazka, all those guys are killers. And if he really wants to have a sustainable reign, he may have to take out every single one of them.
Yeah. I'll say, with Jamal being the champ now, man, it just feels like, light heavyweight, they've been kind of passing the belt around a little bit, obviously, since John left. I understand that. But now it really does feel like the younger guys are starting to kind of come in now for this division with Jamal, with Ankalaev. Glover obviously retired here. Yuri's still in that echelon of the younger guys. So now, outside of those, you do still have like the veterans in Jan Blachowicz and Anthony Smith, which I think is going to be the next matchup. I think those two will probably fight each other for some sort of implications in that top three there next. So yeah, it just feels good right now, and we'll see what happens with the back half. Johnny Walker got a win last night, which we'll talk about. It's just interesting. I think it's good to just have some freshness in this division, because even though we had it after John left, it's been freshness in the sense of like the same people, and now we're kind of hitting the next evolution of the division. So I'm excited to see where this 2023 will play out for 205.
A dark horse to potentially put his name in the title picture, by the way, Dom, because he's in a main event here soon. Ryan Spann, by the way. That would be very interesting if a guy like Ryan Spann, who has recommitted himself, has even put more of himself into the fight game. He is a guy that's got a lot of power, a lot of athleticism, big old guy for light heavyweight, carries big power. I think that would be another guy that you could potentially see by the end of the year
Yeah, for sure. I totally forgot about Ryan Spann. He very much fits that mold that I was just kind of describing. I'm excited, man. It could be a big year for this division. Let's clear up some number one contenders. Let's clear up some obvious matchmaking that makes sense to progress the division. 2023 should treat the 205ers well.
So now we'll move